I'd like to invite three more gentlemen to come up and join us for the panel discussion. And let's start with Dan Rosinski. He's the systems architect and manufacturing engineering at Dow Chemical Company. Please welcome Dan. Next, I'd like to invite Mike Miller. He's the principal technical expert for control and automation systems at Shell Global Solutions. Mike. And last but not least is Yao Fan. He's process control systems engineer for Chevron Energy Technology. Please welcome Yao. So as you can see, we've invited some people who also have extensive use of process control, and I'm sure they all have their stories to tell. So what I'd like to do is invite them one at a time to spend a couple of minutes to explain a little bit about where they're coming from. If they have some recent successes they're excited about, that'd be good. If they have some challenges with their technologies in the process control, I'd like to have them share that to get the ball rolling. In the meantime, think about your questions you'd like to ask the panel. So let's start at the far end with Wei Fan. Would you like to explain a little bit about Chevron's situation?
Hello. Okay, so my name is Yao Fan. I'm working with Chevron Energy Technology Company. It's in Houston, Texas. So we essentially corporate engineering for Chevron. Our work is in the process control system area, and within the team we have DCS, SCADA, PLC, and then enterprise automation system. So I'm in the DCS group and looking at the strategy for the team and the work. So I can share you what we in a couple of minutes what we focus on. We certainly focus on lean engineering, but we also looking from the perspective of how to integrate it. We have separate team that perform that design operate training system, and the transfer data between the DCS and the OTS always a challenge, and we try to integrate it all together into one system. So it's something we try to go beyond just lean engineering. That's one thing that I can share. We also looking at the visualization. So during the visualization integration, everybody want to deal with high performance FHMI. So, but the one thing I think we should get a challenge with the operator task analysis. There are some products, some tool out there, but we not really have good experience with it. So we try to figure out what's the best way to go forward on that. So that's just there's some other items I can talk maybe in a later time, but go ahead, let other panels to speak.
Thank you, Yao. Mike, what does Shell see the situation?
Okay, so one of the issues I have right now is just really defining what a process automation system is and what it looks like, partly due to the types of locations and situations that we're going into, right? We've got a lot of harsh environments and it could be geographically distributed to an extent where we've got issues there. So I've got to worry about minimizing staff, for instance. So we've got severe interest in how do we expose less people to risk by basically having less people there. The cloud may come into the PCD because the control room may be hundreds of miles away from a system. So we've got issues about incorporating internal clouds. floating LNGs. There's a lot of different situations that lead to that. So part of the discussion is really, what does a process control system look like in the first place? What I've seen in the past, though, I'm probably very happy with most of the technology I've seen coming along. I'm going to agree with, I told Don before the presentation that I was going to agree with everything he said, and without knowing what was in there, and I do agree with practically everything that was in there, so. But we've seen a lot of good things. We've got faster execution times out of the systems. Those allow us to do things down in the system now that we were not able to do in the past. We might have had to go to a third-party solution or something like that. Now we can put them in the system. The HMI is more capable. The alarm systems are more capable. The remote I/O and flexible I/O is a very positive thing coming along. Virtualization, can't argue with any of that because it does allow us to do the late binding. Let's see here. We've got better communication between the safety system and the DCS in the past few years, so that's very positive for us. Better business tools for analysis, wireless, procedural automation, MPDS, simulators. All those things are very positive. I think we're getting a lot of value out of them. The things that I'm looking for aren't all that much in the technology arena. There may be more in your people and processes than anything else. I do agree with the statement that says that most of the technologies are probably out there right now that we need. We just need to find a way to incorporate them properly. But from the people standpoint and all that, we've got to have better ways to manage commissioning at startup. We've got to have better ways to test graphics. We've got to have better collaboration tools for work teams, and to some extent, I would like to extend your CPAS picture, because I'd like it to look like a life cycle. I'd like us to have operating integrity, operating excellence, operating people, maintenance people in at the beginning of the cycle to indicate exactly what it is they need. I want this to be a circle and not a straight line project and then you leave. We have to find a way to start extending life cycles again, whatever that means. Maybe virtualization helps a bit, but somehow we need to be able to extend the life cycles. Business is not looking at that favorably. They hate spending money every 5 years. If you can do it on a continual cycle, maybe that works out better. So I like the OPM for sure. We need better tools, in my opinion, to be able to analyze risk to our barriers in our plants. We need to have better tools to analyze brownfield operations so that we can better identify and manage our operating windows. Heck, I've talked enough.
Great. Mike, some good ideas there. Appreciate it. Dan.
Thank you, Dick. So I'm Dan Rosinski. I'm the system architect for manufacturing and engineering at the Dow Chemical Company. So in that role, I really have kind of two big responsibilities. One is from an enterprise point of view, I sit on the enterprise architecture team, along with guys that represent finance and order to cash and all the other major processes. So one of the key things at Dow, at least, is to make sure that manufacturing and engineering operations has a seat at the enterprise level decisions that are being made around information technology, around work processes, around, kind of how do we serve the businesses better. So that's one part of my role. The other part is I lead a group of domain architects and cybersecurity people that focus on manufacturing and engineering. So we call that the Manufacturing and Engineering IT Expertise Center. Has the word IT in it, but that's really about technology. We report up through operations in that function. So the idea is operations now, today, really can't move forward, can't do what it needs to do without technology. I mean, we've heard that throughout this whole thing, and that pace is only accelerating. And in fact, the old days, right, most of us remember, I see a lot of gray hair. I have some gray in here, just can't see it because of the blonde. But the old days where we were separate from the enterprise are gone, right? We at least share platforms, right, when you talk about Windows and Microsoft and some of the hardware platforms. And more than that, we share a lot of stuff that Don was talking about, this idea that there's more we can get from those control systems by starting to connect them and understand how to connect them up with the enterprise system. So those things from an architecture point of view, as an industry, and particularly in Dow, we have some fundamental work to do. So, I mean, I've got connections over into the engineering groups, you know, to work on that. Some of the challenges I see, first off, the successes. I mean, we have a major process automation migration program going on. It's multi-years, you could almost say multi-decades, to move off of our legacy Mod 5 control platform. We've partnered with ABB, and they've been a tremendous partner to us, but we've had to drive some real fundamental improvements in the way you move from one platform to another. So, you know, much of that work, Yaya Nazar's in the room. I mean, if you have any questions about some of the details he presented here last year. I think he also has some time tomorrow on the agenda. So there's some tremendous work we've done to help enable that. But I would say from my point of view, kind of looking at an architecture point of view, some of the fundamental challenges we have, and they tie directly into Don and Mike and what Yao said. One is cybersecurity. You know, as you would expect, one of my roles, having the manufacturing cybersecurity is my responsibility or one of my accountabilities. It's critical that we continue to get the business benefit of integrated systems. But those integrated systems can become the very thing that people use to compromise our ability to produce. So we've got to balance. So the amount of knowledge, the expertise you need to bring into those discussions has expanded beyond just understanding the functionality that you need, understanding kind of how we're going to make the data flow and how we're going to connect these things. It now has this other layer of how are we going to protect those things, right? And how do we make sure they're protected? And one of the things that's really challenging for Dow, and it'd be interesting to see how many people in the audience also have this challenge, is the ancillary systems that we're connecting to the process control systems. So process analyzers and, you know, maybe some kind of weather condition monitoring stuff that we have, or maybe it's material information, you know, coming from a supplier, or all the things we'd love to bring into the control system so that we can be more responsive to changing conditions. But each one of those, while it provides us with valuable information coming in, you know, most of those systems also have an outward facing environment, right? So for us, the process analyzers is a good example. We typically will take that information into the control system, but those same analyzers then have a conduit out to the supplier to make sure they can maintain them, or to our own internal group to do remote monitoring of those analyzers. Well, suddenly from a cybersecurity point of view, you have built a path, right, where you didn't have one before, from outside the enterprise or outside the control system into the control system. So we at least have to think about that. And architecturally, I mean, we're working pretty hard with our Analytical Technology Center on some of those questions. So cyber is one. Another is, and it was referenced before, this idea of MOM integration, that manufacturing operations. I call it S95 integration. I mean, realistically, we've looked at process control from a kind of production operations point of view. So what in the process do we need to control? How do we optimize production operations? But a plant doesn't just work on production operations, right? S95 does a very good job of laying out, you got to have maintenance, right? And you got to have inventory, and you got to have quality. All those things play a part in running a plant. And how much of those elements, how many of those elements need to be brought into the control system? How do you do it in a smart manner, right? In a secure manner, and also then take advantage of that integration, right, across the stacks. So S95 is a great model. But unfortunately, in Dow, and I've seen it at other companies, it's created sort of silos where you're really good at quality operations, or you're really good at production or inventory, but you haven't really gone across those areas as much. And the final thing, and this may be specific to Dow, although I see it across the chemical industry, is the idea of modularity is very important to us, but sort of almost from the opposite point of view, right? It's disintegration that we're interested in terms of modularity. Because if you look at Dow's business portfolio, we have divested a bunch of companies, we're buying companies. So the idea is we have integrated, we've done a lot of good work to integrate control rooms and integrate plants and units together. But as we sell assets, some of those assets sit in the same site as assets that we're keeping, right? So now we have this new challenge which says we want to integrate and get the value of integration, but we better logically architect the places where we would separate if we need to. And that is an incredibly difficult proposition right now as Dow changes our portfolio and starts selling businesses. So in the chemical industry, I mean, it was cited before, 15 years ago or whatever the number was, there were the top 20 chemical companies, only 8 of them still exist. That doesn't mean those assets went away. They've all been absorbed by somebody and they've probably traded hands a couple of times. So it's not an unusual thing for our corporations to have a strategy that says we're going to add and to subtract assets that make sense to run our business. The impact on all of us is how do we make that happen, right? I mean, how do we actually do that down at the unit level, down at the control system level? You know, simple, complicated things like integrated control rooms, right? What do you do when suddenly 3 of the units of the 10 that are in the integrated control room aren't yours anymore? They're competitors. You know, how do you disintegrate that control room? So it's just that modularity discussion is important for a lot of reasons. An unusual one, and one that we're facing right now, is sort of this disintegration idea. So those are some of the things we're thinking about, or at least I'm thinking about.
Well, thank you, Dan. It's just given me an idea for a new expression, you know, the plug and play expression. How about unplug and play, you know? So you need to have that as well. And it's the world we live in today. But is there anyone in the audience has a question that would like to ask the panel? Or a comment, you know, if you have something you'd like to say about what you're conditioned, we'd love to hear that too. Well, why oh, here's a gentleman right here.
Hi, Bruce Jensen from Yokogawa. I think I wanted to ask a question both of maybe Don and Dan here, because maybe it's a words of semantics, but Don's, you know, I've heard of upgrades, I've heard of migrations, and Don's speaking, and I heard of migrations of Dan, but Don is speaking of replacements. Is that, you know, I've heard of rip and replacements too, but it doesn't sound any ripping here, but, you know, is there a specific means that you think that a replacement is needed versus migration versus upgrade? Has technology changed that much that you prefer that term?
I'll let Don answer that.
Rick, I wouldn't read too much into the choice of replacement. So, I mean, you know, we'd like it to be, you know, as least disruptive to operations as possible. But again, I mean, I hear loud and clear from senior management that if we ask them for money, they'd like to see a return on it. So these projects that are non-return stay in business are very difficult to justify to management. So the thing maybe that you should take away from my comment is when we do, whatever you call it, a replacement and upgrade, we'd like to have the possibility of plus value, not just cost to the owner.
And from our point of view, the process automation migration, you know, some people call it the Mod 5 migration. I mean, those two terms are mostly interchangeable. It's not a migration, really, although there's a ton of tools we've built to take what we've done in those legacy controllers and move them to this commercial platform. But it's a rip and replace. I mean, we're not going to, that hardware is Dow hardware. I mean, it's not commercial hardware, and the software on top of it is Dow software, right? So, I mean, we're not keeping anything. So you could call it a replacement. I think migration was just a kind of a gentler term, right? To talk about how we were going to move, so.
Yeah, if I could add to that, one of the things that that vendors in the room could help is I've heard over and over again from owner-operators saying, you know, justifying getting rid of this 20-plus-year-old stuff, or getting rid of, that's not the right word, but doing something that improves my operability, improves my ability to manage my technology, is hard to get through management if you're not doing anything new. So suppliers in the room can certainly help that. Help them build a business case that they're going to be able to do something more important with technologies that they're going to bring into their system. Here's a question over here.
Yes,
Daniel?
Daniel Knowles with TVA and Power Generation. I had a question for Don on the comment about the continual upgrade, and that combined with kind of the open platforms. And so when you think about the native controls vendor together with all the different parties that may have integration software that ties into that openly, what that looks like, that continual upgrade process of how releases happen of software and how that still evolves, but at the same time keeps the openness.
Well, I think probably think of the theme of the open interoperable characteristic that we would like to see. So if interfaces are defined such that we can replace components of the system without having to replace the entire monolith, that's really the attribute that we're looking for. I mean, that's the kind of environment that we have at the MES or level 3 layer. I mean, we can replace and upgrade individual classes of applications without losing the whole of the MES layer functionality. I think that's the way I'd like you to see the state that we'd like to be in.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, again, going up a layer in the business stack, right? I mean, a lot of us have lived in, well, if you've been on the business side and seen what it's been like, there's a lot of point-to-point interface, but that has, over time, really morphed, right, to now where modules at the business application layer come in and out, and they can do so frequently. And in fact, cloud applications and software as a service, all sorts of things are plugging in without causing the whole ERP system to have to be redone or upgraded. So there's the analogs or the comparisons are really good, and we need to drive that down another layer, I think, because we haven't done it.
Yao or Mike, would you like to add to that?
Well, just to maybe, I'm sorry for jumping in, Dick, but just, I'm not asking for more frequent upgrades. I mean, patch management drives our people absolutely berserk, okay? And this is one of the things that's happened with openness, okay? If I can paraphrase the Greek general Pyrrhus, one more open system and we shall be lost. But we want to find the right way to do this. I mean, I think it was really instructive. I didn't know this. The comment this morning about I don't know if it's interesting if true that outfits like Facebook and LinkedIn can do install patches globally throughout their global network within a day compared to the world that we're operating in. It's really astonishing, actually.
It is.
I'm sorry.
We or Mike, do you have any additional? Use the microphone, by the way. Okay. If you okay. All right. Good. There's a question over here.
Yeah, Charlie Green with Aramco Services Company. I have a comment and a couple of questions for Don. First, I'd like to applaud you for your gutsy vision of the way of managing future obsolescence. First question, are you getting much pushback from the vendors on the collaborative open function that you're pursuing? And the second question is, are you looking for any other owner-operators to collaborate with you on this?
Okay, so with respect to pushback, we certainly, I am reminded of all of in the early days, this is probably maybe a generation and a half of systems ago when owner-operators started asking for openness and the suppliers are saying, are you sure? So our experience with the step into using commercial off-the-shelf stuff, clearly what we see is a reduction in basically the initial investment cost. But we have certainly seen an increase in our operating expense to use the systems. So we would like to improve that aspect of the business proposition. And so that's, I guess, my answer to your first question. So on your question about collaborations with other asset owners, I think we're going to have to speak with aligned voices now. For me to make a statement beyond their skirts pretty close to competition law that I have to be really careful to avoid, so I don't want to go anything further. But clearly, the business proposition has to be that the buyers are asking for this kind of en masse. The suppliers have to respond. That's just business 101.
Yeah, any comments from you folks? Mike?
Well, I don't disagree with that. I think we've gotten ourselves into any number of groups or consortia that are technically oriented, and they do push for common goals. And there's nothing here that you saw that isn't really a common technical or work process kind of goal.
Yao, did you want to?
Yeah, from Chevron perspective, I also agree. I think if the asset owner can collaborate and define the requirements, I think we'll have a better chance of getting the supplier to cooperate.
Good. Yeah, I think just a comment from my point of view. I think there's examples of owner-operator collaboration in the past. Things like safety. You know, there's been a lot of effort to have common safety principles and guidelines. So things like cybersecurity, prevention of disasters is something that we talked about this morning. And you know, there's lots of opportunities for owner-operators to collaborate and just say, here's what we all want. So it's a question from the back. Hi, Cliff.
Is this on? Good. Cliff Peterson, ex-Suncor, now with Mimosa. Comment for the whole panel and a question for the whole panel. There's a tremendous amount of work being done now with the standards organizations to define implementable standards and collaborate those standards on interoperability based on open architecture. This is being pulled together under the ISO organization internationally, Technical Committee 184 on Industrial Automation. And I'm wondering, how much are you folks aware of that, and how much are you planning to align with those standards and implement them, because they are reaching an implementable state?
Anyone on the panel want to make a comment?
Somebody else go first.
Okay, I can try. I'm speaking for the process control system team, but within our organization, Chevron Process Automation Unit, we have additional team, and I know the what do you call it, the S&O team, the one deal with optimization and so on, and MES layers. They have people working in that space. So I think we are aware of that and know what's going on there. But personally, I don't have enough experience to say exactly how Chevron involvement in that particular layer 3 level applications.
I guess I'm probably in pretty much the same position. I don't know about that particular standard, that particular committee that's being worked on, but in general, we participate on an awful lot of ISA or IEC or ISO type committees, and our long-term goal, as much as possible, is to run ourselves against those kinds of standards and not purely internal standards. We'd like to be able to find international standards that we can run against. So if we're not involved in that one, we probably ought to be looking at it.
Yeah, ditto. So for sure. I mean, Dow's position is, and Eric Osmond, I mean, who's retired now, but I mean, he was a standard bearer for this idea that looking externally and gathering together groups of like-minded individuals, right, who have a need to drive standards, right, through these organizations is the right way to do it. So Dow is heavily involved in a bunch of the standards committees. I don't know about ISO 184. I mean, it's not something I've been personally involved in, but we are constantly looking for those gatherings where it looks like they're getting the right level of energy, right, to start moving forward. And we all also know, those of us that have been involved in standards, that there are standards that kind of just bubble along for a while, right, and have some participation but don't really go anywhere. And then suddenly some business or functional or some group, kind of charges them up and they start moving forward. So, we are eager to find those that coincide with what Dow's struggling with, the things that we think are important. So the way you described it sounds interesting, so, I will definitely find out more about it. So.
Yeah, so Cliff, thank you. I'm certainly aware of the Mimosa work, and I know my colleague Doug Johnston is very aware of Mimosa work as well. This is not the right venue for me to go into a critique of how standards have or haven't, functioned in our industry. I mean, I am a managing director on the ISA Standards and Practices Board, again, with Eric Kozman's outstanding leadership. But I would cite for your consideration the astonishing rate of progress of that FACE consortium group that I cited. And what they have done is they've not, it wasn't first things first, go create new standards. One of the first exercises was survey the space of potentially applicable standards and then use the ones that work. I think that is perhaps a mantra for us to follow. And I'll stop there. I don't want to get into a critique of standard setting.
No, let me just make a comment too. I think one of the things that we've seen in the past where standards have worked and standards have failed, I think standards work really great if everybody sees the advantage of adhering to these things. But where they fail is when there's too much emphasis on trying to create a competitive advantage by tweaking it this way or not doing it that way, and then the things just drag on. But right now, what I think you've heard from this group, and I'm sure other owner-operators would say, let's just make it happen. Let's put things together and make it happen. These guys have got money. They want to spend money. Suppliers out there would like to have that money come into their organization. So let's work together on these things. There's another question back here. Was there? Oh, Tim, you look like you had a question. Any other questions in the audience? Yep, Cliff.
I'll just add one comment to that, in that we do have an owner-operator leadership council that we encourage people to collaborate on, and it's up to the owner-operators really to drive that. Yep. And the more participation we can have, the better. And I happen to chair that, so I'd be interested in talking with all of you.
Great. Okay, I think we're getting close to the magic time to end, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming and sitting in our session, and particularly want to thank our panel members, and they've done a great job. Please join me in giving them a round of applause.